On the show this week, we drive Maruti's micro SUV, the S-Presso. We also sample MG's second offering for India, the all-electric ZS EV. And we get astride KTM's long-awaited 790 Duke.
It's no secret that Indians love their SUVs, so it only makes sense that India's largest manufacturer should cash in on the craze with their latest offering. We did see it as the concept a couple of years ago at the Auto Expo, and here it is finally in the flesh, the S-Presso. The S-Presso follows the new trend of a slim grille that's fitted with angular chrome elements and the Maruti logo emblazoned in the center. The toothy-looking grille merges into the headlamps and the DRLs are positioned below them, lower on the bumper. The air dam and the lower half of the bumper are blackened out. It's also a squared-off bonnet and an upright A-pillar with the strong wheel arches that give it the required SUV look. The wheels are 14-inch, but the large gap of the wheel well makes them look small, and the rear just looks like a hatch. The stance is a bit awkward, and overall I'm not a fan of the way the S-Presso looks on the outside, but that opinion certainly changes once I'm inside. The interior of the S-Presso is quite quirky and funky. There are lots of cuts and curves on this dashboard. It's got body-colored highlights around the AC vents and around this attention-grabbing central part of the console, which is very mini-like. It houses the speedometer right here in the center. You've also got the touchscreen info display that comes with Apple CarPlay and Android Auto. Below that, you have the manual controls for the AC and a lot of storage area. There are also a lot of features. Let's take a look. On the safety front, the S-Presso is based on the hard-tech platform, which means it meets the latest safety norms. It also gets other safety features. Let's take a look. So first up, sitting in the S-Presso, it's a nice elevated seating position. So you get a commanding view of the road, and it does give you that SUV-like feel. But there is no seat height adjust, so while this elevated position may be great for someone that's my height, I think for taller people, the top of the windscreen will impede in their line of vision. The seats themselves are comfortable and the cabin feels spacious. The S-Presso has a reasonable boot as well for a car of its size. Powering the S-Presso is Maruti's BS6 compliant 1-litre K10B petrol engine that puts out 68 HP and 90 Nm of torque. It's mated to a 5-speed manual and an AMT or AGS as Maruti like to call it. So the S-Presso is the first of Maruti's cars to get the BS6 version of the K10 engine. And at the outset, it's a nice refined engine. Power delivery from this engine is very evenly spread across the range, and that's what makes it really easy to drive. We opted to try the AMT first. The engine has enough power, but what makes really light of driving is the AMT. Upshifts and downshifts both come really easily with minimal hesitation. In fact, this is one of the better AMTs we have driven. Cutting through city traffic, the S-Presso feels agile. The steering is light to use and the turning circle is good, so you won't need 3-point turns unless the road is really narrow. As we headed out of Jodhpur and onto the highway, the engine surprised us with its capability there too. It breathes easily and it's always ready to serve up power, but out on the highway, the AMT does take its time. Now, as you get out on open stretches of road, you'll notice that the AMT does shift up quite quickly. But if you want to overtake something and you want a sudden burst of power, you will have to press hard down on the accelerator, because if you're gentle with the throttle, then it tends to carry a gear and lose power before it actually shifts down. So gradual acceleration doesn't work for quick overtakes. You really have to push hard. But even here, the hesitation from the AMT is minimal, and once you floor the throttle, the shift comes quick enough. The other way around this is to flip it into manual mode, of course, and then it offers shift down on demand. We did drive the manual car as well, and we found that it felt quite different. The performance feels more sprightly for sure. We drove it both in city and out on the highway. Let's begin with the way it felt in the city. The manual is very easy to drive. Power is spread so evenly that you really don't have to work it too hard. You don't have to work the gears too much. Even in a higher gear, if you slow down, all you have to do is put your foot down. It just gets a move on so easily. But talking of gears, even if you do have to work the gearbox, it's light, it's easy, so is the clutch. So this is a really city-friendly car. Although the AMT is good and it makes city driving a breeze, the manual would still be my choice because it does feel more responsive. The fact is, even in the manual, you really don't have to use the gears that much in stop-start conditions, and so it also feels effortless. And if you do have to take the S-Presso out on long drives, you'll find that it is surprisingly good even out on the highways. It's got more than enough power. On the highway, you notice the S-Presso is a light car and it doesn't feel tough, but it's stable and the steering also has good on-center feel. So it inspires enough confidence to get up to triple-digit speeds and cruise comfortably. The roads we drove on were dead straight, but around the few longer corners, we did feel the height of the car and the roll. However, I'm going to reserve comment on handling till we do a proper test. So to sum it up, the experience behind the wheel of the S-Presso is one that is quite pleasing. And now let's find out how it is for passengers in the back. As far as space goes, the back seat of the S-Presso is quite roomy. I have Jay, who's 6 feet tall, driving me. I'm 5'3" seated behind him, and there is lots of leg room. The good thing is that the seat is also quite high up, so there's lots of space to stretch your legs out underneath it. In fact, I can get my legs absolutely straight out. The floorboard is flat too, so there is enough space for the third passenger. Might be a bit of a tight squeeze width-wise, but there is enough legroom for that third passenger. What makes it feel more spacious is the fact that you sit high up, so you have good visibility. There's a nice large window area and the roof is high as well. Now, as long as you're at low speeds, the ride quality is really good. Bump absorption is nice, so it feels really comfortable. But as you pick up the pace, there's a lot more vertical movement in this back seat and you do feel the firmness as well. The S-Presso may not grab eyeballs, but as they say, never judge a book by its cover. Once you get inside the S-Presso, it impresses with its funky interior, good quality of materials, its spaciousness, and also the ease of driving that it offers. It may be priced a little higher than its outright rivals, but it is a refined, well put together product that comes with the peace of mind of a Maruti badge. So if you're in the market for a budget car, the S-Presso is definitely one you should look at.
Coming up after the break, if you thought the MG Hector made a big impact, you should check out the sequel. We drive the MG ZS EV.
This is the mighty Narmada, and with us today is MG's second SUV for India. Now it's a bit different from the Hector because this is a ZS that's powered by electricity, the ZS EV, and we are here to give you a quick preview. First up, the design. Doesn't exactly shout EV or future tech, does it? What it has is its share of attractive bits. The ZS actually has a bit more character on the inside. So on the inside, a pretty high quality cabin, good quality plastics, much better than on the Hector. Beautiful brushed aluminium, chrome, leather, double stitching, these fantastic vents, they really function well. But of course the focus of this car is that it's an electric, and so you do get your information for the electric and your modes. There's driver modes here, there's eco, obviously a sport and a normal. There's the curse system, the energy recovery system you can adjust from here. And apart from that, of course, no traditional gear lever. This rotary knob here works as a gear lever, P for park in the center, and you roll it for reverse, neutral and drive. The cabin is also more spacious, especially compared to its direct rival, the Hyundai Kona. Also adding to the ambience, other high quality bits like the steering, the shuttered center console box, the well-finished door locks, all parts that seem like they are sourced from MG's partner in China, Volkswagen.
So a bit more legroom and space here compared to the Kona. You can see that little bit of space, but you are sat a bit low. The seat, however, is pretty comfortable and quality is actually extremely good. And of course, it's an MG, so it has this massive sunroof.
And what adds to comfort is that the ZS rides well.
Now, MG has also found a good balance between ride and the need to keep the suspension stiff due to the big battery underneath. It's pretty comfortable, it rounds off bumps well. It's only when you have a sort of large bump with a steep edge like that you do feel a bit of a thump inside the cabin, and you do feel a bit of that hard edge.
Now, because getting a quick charge just about anywhere is a huge challenge, driving range and energy regeneration is extremely important.
Now, the ZS EV has 3 driving modes. Apart from the normal one which you can drive in, there's a sport and of course an eco mode. Of the 3 driving modes, eco is the least aggressive, and it's there to give you that maximum range to help you eke out the longest range from the battery.
When launched, the ZS EV will come with a 44.5 kilowatt-hour battery and have a new European driving cycle range of 335 kilometers. The Kona only gets a 39.2 kilowatt-hour battery, but since it regenerates better, seeing which one will travel longer will be an interesting test. In normal, the next mode, responses to the accelerator are more immediate, and it's smooth, torquey and effortless, just like a luxury car. Sport is much more fun.
Now, select sport and performance is actually pretty sprightly. Of course, the sound of the engine is replaced by that whine, that one, but the performance is still there.
And it's particularly good when you want to overtake.
Now, we often get to hear that EVs aren't well suited to the highway, but that's just not the case when it comes to actually driving on the road. Pull up to a potential victim, as it were, and all you need to do to go past is put your foot down and engage that burst of torque.
What makes it so devastatingly effective is that all the torque comes in instantly when you hit the throttle, like when you hit a switch. In comparison, a conventional car needs to match revs, drop a gear, and then accelerate. And that 1.5 or 2 seconds lost makes all the difference. MG plans to launch the ZS EV towards the end of the year or early next year. The car sold here eventually is likely to be the mildly facelifted one. And like the Hector, it too will be loaded with kit. MG is likely to price it more aggressively than the Kona 2, somewhere around the rupees 22 lakh range. If you're in the market for an electric car at this price, the ZS EV could be well worth the wait, especially as this one is better suited to what Indian customers are likely to want.
Up next, it's time for us to test the Scalpel, otherwise known as the KTM 790 Duke.
It's taken them long enough, but we finally have a big capacity twin-cylinder KTM in India, and that's something worth celebrating. This is the 790 Duke, and going by the fact that KTM has nicknamed it the Scalpel, you know it's probably going to be something quite special. KTM started with a blank sheet of paper for this motorcycle with the aim to create one of the most precise and exciting machines in the middleweight naked segment. The first step in that journey was to make the bike look the part, and as a result, the bodywork is sharp but as minimal as possible. The tall fuel tank, edgy extensions, upswept exhaust and that chunky swing arm add heaps of character, but at the same time, the rear looks quite bland and I wish the 390 style headlamp had its own identity. Still, the overall effect carries the trademark KTM style aggression and quality levels are quite good as well. But the standout factor is that this motorcycle is really quite compact. This tightly packaged theme mirrors what's happening underneath, and KTM has taken a couple of very interesting engineering solutions to make the 790 as light as possible.
Let's take the frame for example. Almost every single road-going KTM uses a trellis frame, but you won't see those trademark metal triangles on the 790.
And that's because KTM decided to use a more compact tubular steel frame instead, while the entire rear subframe is made out of aluminium. The result is a main frame that weighs just 8.8 kilos, while the rear subframe weighs in at less than 2 kilos per side. Those cutouts on the subframe aren't just for style either, and they serve as air intakes for the engine, which itself is a load-bearing part of the frame. And since the engine is typically one of the heaviest aspects of a motorcycle, this is the second area where KTM became innovative in the quest of dropping the kilos.
It's now common knowledge that this is KTM's first ever parallel twin engine. But why go down that road? Well, once again, the answer comes in terms of packaging and getting everything as slim as possible.
KTM found that its traditional V-twin layout simply didn't allow the packaging and weight-saving levels that they were striving for, so they went for a parallel twin layout instead. This 8-valve DOHC motor displaces 799cc and it runs a high compression ratio of 12.7:1, which helps it to put out 105 horsepower and 87 Nm of torque. The power figure is the lowest in the segment, but the torque is almost class-leading, and that's what characterizes the riding experience. Speaking of character, KTM has gone down the increasingly popular path of using an uneven firing order to give the engine a more textured sound and feel that is quite reminiscent of its V-twins. The result is a loud, angry, and quite likable beat from the exhaust. The interesting thing is that the motor is actually much smoother than the sound would have you believe, and vibration levels are very well controlled. It also seems quite content to ride smoothly at low RPM, especially in rain or street mode. There are 4 riding modes in total, and rain offers a 2% drop in power with very mellow responses, while street, sport, and track offer increasing levels of throttle aggression as you go up. Performance is engaging to the point that you'll be laughing out loud in your helmet, and the short gearing only serves to further exaggerate the 790's superb low and mid-range punch.
But as much of a joy as this engine is, the real star of the 790 is the chassis.
You get a sense of this the moment you sit on the 790 Duke and discover that it feels almost as narrow as a 390. It feels far more compact than any of its rivals, and the sense of lightness and agility is amazing. With a curb weight of just about 187 kilos, the 790 Duke is on par with the Street Triple S as the lightest in its class. But this is on paper, and it feels noticeably lighter when you're actually riding the bike. It is no surprise then that the 790 leaps into corners with absolutely minimal effort, and it changes directions lightning fast as well. The good news is that this doesn't come at the expense of stability, partly because this bike has among the longest wheelbases in its class, but also because there's a steering damper which helps prevent the handlebar from getting too loose and wild. The suspension is by WP, but it only comes with preload adjustment for the rear shock, which is a bit disappointing, although the setup is very nicely balanced. The bike feels confident and well damped, but neither end comes across as too stiff, and I think this is a setup that should work quite decently on the street as well. On the track though, the 790 is such an enjoyable toy that I just couldn't get enough, and given the choice, I'd be out lapping all day on it. None of its rivals feel this effortless, and it took just one lap around what is an unfamiliar circuit to me before the corner speeds and lean angles were at camera-worthy levels. When it is time to slow down, the J-joint brakes work really well, and while they may not have the sheer bite of a superbike, they're very strong and pack good progression and feel. It's a similar story with the Maxxis tires, which aren't quite track day tires, but they make for capable sport tires in the dry, and they didn't feel like a compromise on the track. Besides which, the 790's smooth and smart electronic system keeps everything in check, even when the rear tire eventually finds its limit.
And that's the next party trick the 790 has up its sleeve, because I can confidently stand here and tell you that this bike has the best electronics that you will find on any motorcycle at the price point.
Let's begin with the riding modes. The first 3 are preset, but track mode allows you plenty of customization. But my favorite part of the track mode is that it allows you to shift between 9 levels of traction control on the move using just the up and down arrow buttons on the handlebar. The 790 uses an inertial measurement unit, better known as an IMU, so the traction control system is corner sensitive, as is the ABS. If you like, the rear ABS can be deactivated, but the entire system can't be turned off. Now, a lot of this is segment first stuff, and the 790 is also the first to offer an up and down quick shifter at this price point. Nevertheless, all these electronics work with the potent engine and chassis to make the 790 a very exciting machine that you can safely enjoy pushing to your limits. But let's not forget, this is a street bike after all.
This is where the 790 surprised me, because I now have a feeling that it has the potential to be a nice street bike even out on our roads.
There are quite a few aspects that suggest the 790 will be quite friendly out on the street as well. The turning radius is tight, the clutch is decently light, and the engine's low speed manners are quite smooth, definitely more so than the 390 Duke. There's also plenty of ground clearance, and while the riding position is sporty, it's also spacious and it's not too committed. The one downside I can see for now is that some people won't like the seat height, although the bike's narrowness certainly makes it easier to get your feet down. More importantly though, we still need to evaluate the engine's heat management and see just how hot things get for both the rider and the pillion. And with that, it's now time to talk about the price. At an introductory price of Rs 8.63 lakh ex showroom, the 790 is not as affordable as most of us had hoped. The thing is that over the past 7 years, KTM has taught us to expect thrilling performance at an unbelievable price. Unfortunately for the 790, it comes to India as a CKD kit, and the only localization at the moment is in regard to small things like the engine and sari guards. But if you look at the international pricing, the 790 Duke is positioned above its 4-cylinder Japanese rivals and below the Euro competition from Triumph and Ducati, and that's the case in our market as well. In that sense, the price can be reasoned, and while this KTM doesn't offer game-changing pricing, it does a superb job of making you fall in love with its performance.
I came here today fully expecting this to be a fun bike, but I didn't think it would be this much of a laugh. The first part of the test is complete, and the 790 Duke is an absolute riot of a motorcycle to play around with. Now all we have to see is what it's like in the real world, and personally, I can't wait to find out.
And now it's time for tips on sustainability and protecting the environment with Servo Futura G Plus from Indian Oil. Turn your engine off at traffic lights or when the car's stopped. Make sure your car's filters are clean.